This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a quick run through the markets. Let's start in Kenya. The NSE 20 fell under the 1900-point mark in the final week of 2021. At these levels, it's posting a marginal rise for the year, just over 1.1%. Trading volumes, the holidays being what they are, relatively thin. The investment firm Centum trading more shares than Safaricom. Normally, Safaricom that tends to hold on to that top spot. Centum closed about 0.7% higher. The insurance firm Britam closed 6.25% higher. 3 days ago, it did announce that IFC would buy the 4.2% stake it held in Equity Bank. Here's what's coming up tonight. The High Court in South Africa stopped Shell from conducting a seismic survey along the Wild Coast. We'll give you a preview of a documentary starring Tanzania's president, which premieres in April 2022. And a Kenyan startup develops an affordable way to turn households away from charcoal and into consumers of LPG. Our starting point tonight is in South Africa. A high court over there has granted an interdict against Shell's seismic survey along the Wild Coast. Now, that is the second application of the sort made to the same court to stop the company's seismic survey. Now, this comes after court dismissed the application by activists to stop the survey earlier in the month on the basis that irreparable harm to marine species had not been proved. The applicants include the Amadiba, Dwesekebe, Port St. John's and Keymouth communities, which are all small-scale fishing communities. In the application, the applicants argue that Shell does not have the necessary environmental authorization as far as the National Environmental Management Act is concerned to lawfully undertake this seismic exploration activities within the area. All right, then, so let's explore exactly what happened in this case this time round in court. Delmi Kipidio is the Southern Africa Hub Director at Natural Justice. He joins us now from Cape Town. Thank you for your time this evening. Let's, perhaps for the benefit of our viewers, let's just explain what this seismic survey entails and the sort of harm it might do to marine life.
Sure. Thank you, Ramah, and thanks to viewers. So the problem with the seismic survey is twofold. The one is that the amount of noise that this will create underwater, because sound travels so much further and faster underwater, is really disruptive to marine life, to the point where we say it could cause irreparable or irreversible harm to marine life. What the experts say to us is that with marine life, particularly creatures such as dolphins and whales and so on, sound is really the way in which they communicate. It's the way that they navigate. It's similar to human beings suddenly being faced by a complete blackout. And then on top of that, the power of the sound waves, our experts have told us, will also cause damage and harm to things like zooplankton, which really form the basis of marine life. It could cause irreparable damage to creatures like turtles. It will destroy their breeding grounds. So what we were able to do in the second case, as distinct from the first case, certainly in the view of the judge in that case, was to bring that expert evidence to bear and to really show, what kind of harm would be caused by these seismic blasts.
I'm glad you brought up that first case, because on the 3rd of December, the first application to essentially have Shell not do these seismic surveys was dismissed, and the same argument basically was made. So is a distinction here the fact that evidence to prove that harm was provided in the second case but not in the first?
I think the short answer is that we were able to bring more evidence to bear in the second case than in the first one. The first one, you must remember, was brought on a very urgent basis, with very narrow time frames, and although we did proffer evidence to that effect, the judge in that case felt that it was not sufficient, and in the second case, I think we had more time to bring more expert evidence to bear.
Okay, so in their defense, just
it's
to get back to the Shell question, because in court they basically said that the claims of harm to marine life, in their view, were essentially subjective. But what evidence did they adduce in court to actually support their claim?
None, really. I mean, Shell's advocate was fairly clear in saying that they had no way of really opposing the applicants when they said that their cultural and their spiritual life would be severely harmed by these activities. And Shell in their papers did not deal with this matter at all, which the judge pointed out quite specifically. And so the evidence of the applicants in this case had to be accepted by the court, because Shell essentially just said that, well, people's beliefs are subjective, whereas, we have what they would call objective facts around, their mitigation and so on. But again, I think what's important to point out is that Shell did not bring a single expert. They did not quote a single expert. They simply brought the CEO, the chairperson of the exploration company, whereas the applicants in this case were able to bring, tens of expert evidence of experts to bear, and that was obviously persuasive to the judge in this matter.
Okay, so let me pull back from a regional perspective. Large deposits of natural gas found in Mozambique, Namibia, home to roughly 11 billion, by some estimates, barrels of crude oil. Natural gas thought to be available in the Karoo as well, and we're in this macroeconomic environment where natural gas is becoming a lot more attractive as a sort of transition fuel. Isn't it inevitable, therefore, that you're going to be fighting a lot more cases of this sort against fossil fuel companies that look at South Africa and think, well, there are deposits around here, why shouldn't we be able to bring these to market?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're correct in saying that, international oil companies are essentially scouring the coast of Africa for these natural gas and fossil fuel deposits. Our organization, Natural Justice, is engaged in a number of these cases, from KwaZulu-Natal to the Wild Coast in the Eastern Cape of South Africa to the West Coast of South Africa, as well as you've mentioned, in Namibia. I mean, the problem really is that this happens in the context of a report which has just been released, which tells us that the world simply cannot afford to have, more extraction of these natural gases and oils and fossil fuels, because they will tip us over the balance, over the tipping point. If we use less than 40% of the existing stocks of fossil fuels, we will already surpass that. So the question really is, why are we looking for more oil and gas in a world where I think most reasonable people understand that we are facing a climate crisis, and the argument that this brings, sort of development and economic benefits to local communities simply is not borne out by the facts. Right. One can point to Shell activities in Nigeria, for example, and various other places, where those economic benefits are to paraphrase the judge in a different context, actually not only speculative, but they just never materialize. And what is left is an environment which is destroyed. Marine life, wildlife, livelihoods are just utterly destroyed, and the profits go to a very small number of people, shareholders, those sorts of people, right. And the actual cost is externalized onto people and onto the planet.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Delmi Capito, Southern Africa Hub Director at Natural Justice, joining us now on the program from Cape Town. Thank you for your time. Now, a widely anticipated travel documentary starring Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan is set to premiere next April. The documentary shows that the head of state is talking to the audience, taking them on an adventure across some of Tanzania's most iconic landscapes. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lucando with that story.
It's not often that politicians get to star in films. This coming April, President Samia Suluhu Hassan will come to screens around the world in a travel documentary dubbed The Royal Tour. She is using her time in the spotlight to showcase Tanzania's various tourism, investment, arts and cultural attractions.
The goal is to show the world that Tanzanite gemstones come from Tanzania. We are showing them evidence of where the mines are, the way they are mined, and how we add value until it reaches the end user.
The documentary is part of a series produced by Emmy Award-winning American journalist Peter Greenberg. While the major focus of the series is on tourism, President Hassan is also using the platform to boost foreign investments.
We want to showcase our good governance and our stable political climate in order for investors to come and invest so that we win and they win.
Tanzania is not the only country to get featured in the series. In the past, the show has featured a number of world leaders and their countries, including Rwanda's President Paul Kagame.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic, Tanzania would receive some 1.5 million tourists from around the world every year, earning the country around $2.5 billion. President Hassan is hoping that some screen time will help boost these numbers.
Most members of the public are particularly excited about the documentary's potential impact on the country's tourism.
As a nation, we are getting a tool to transmit to the world what makes us a nation, and to also transmit to a large extent what treasures we hold as a country.
Because when they come, they visit different hotels, they buy different things from different vendors. So it's a positive, it will bring positive impact in our development. So it's a good thing.
Critics argue that the documentary alone may not be enough to change the fortunes of the country. However, President Hassan remains optimistic that her time in the spotlight will ultimately benefit ordinary Tanzanians. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Above the reach of
And our company news wrap picks up essentially where that story left off in Tanzania. The country has signed a contract with a Turkish firm to build a 368-kilometer section of its standard gauge rail network. The infrastructure deal is expected to cost just under $2 billion, and it will be funded through debt. It's part of a 1,219-kilometer line that Tanzania is helping to build in order to boost trade with her neighboring countries. U.S. auto safety regulators have stepped up a series of investigations into engine fires that have plagued Hyundai and Kia vehicles for more than 6 years now. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says that a new engineering analysis investigation covers over 3 million vehicles from the 2011 to the 2016 model years. The agency has received 161 complaints of engine fires. Some of those occurred in vehicles that had already been recalled. Apple shares continue to move high on Tuesday despite news that it will shut down all 12 of its New York City stores to curb the spread in Omicron COVID infections. The shares were 0.4% high in pre-market trading. They've gone as high as $181.24 in today's session. Apple shares are roughly within 1% of the level needed to give the firm a $3 trillion market cap. Apple shares have gone up by 36% so far in 2021. And Britain-based tech firm OneWeb has launched 36 communication satellites into space from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. The company has been launching satellites into orbit as part of a broader plan to deliver affordable broadband internet access through satellites. That's a run through your headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. We'll tell you why Egyptians should prepare themselves for reduced subsidies in 2022. And rising public debt in Nigeria is causing concern as it approaches the $100 billion mark.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Let's head over to East Africa. The World Health Organization says the number of COVID-19 cases involving Omicron is doubling every 1.5 to 3 days in countries where there's community transmission of this variant. But what exactly is this impact having across African economies? CGTN's Robert Nagila has that report.
First detected on November 24th by scientists in South Africa, the Omicron variant of COVID-19 is spreading rapidly across Africa. Designated as a variant of concern by the World Health Organization, it spreads much faster than any other previous variant. CDC Africa says 22 African countries had reported cases of the variant by December 23rd. 6 of those countries, Burkina Faso, Togo, Egypt, Kenya, Morocco and Mauritius, reported Omicron COVID-19 cases in the past 2 weeks. In response, African countries have stepped up measures to detect and control the spread of the variant. Several countries, including Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe and Botswana, have introduced vaccine mandates as they urge more people to get vaccinated. In Kenya, a government directive that bars unvaccinated people from public spaces and in-person government services has taken effect. The positivity rate of infection on December 27th stood at 37.6%, well above the 5% positivity rate recommended by WHO for countries to ease restrictions. In Rwanda, passengers arriving into the country are required to quarantine for 3 days at a designated hotel, while a midnight to 4 a.m. curfew is in place. By December 24th, 9.3 million cases of COVID-19 had been recorded on the continent, with total deaths at over 226,000. But there is some relief as data from South Africa suggests its Omicron peak may have passed. The World Health Organization, though, is urging caution as Europe and the United States continue to report a surge in COVID-19 cases attributed to Omicron. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has issued a decree stopping the issuance of food ration cards for new families. Now, these ration cards entitle their holders to receive 35 free or subsidized food items from the government every month. Now, for decades, these food subsidies are meant to help support the poorer end of society. But officials say this entire food subsidy system is no longer functioning as planned. Between July 2022 and June 2025, Egypt is forecast to spend an average of $6 billion every fiscal year just on food subsidies. Yasser Kim takes up the story.
For over 80 years, poor married couples have been receiving food ration cards. They would automatically add their children on the food ration cards and with time, their grandchildren as well, and so forth. Nearly 2/3 of the 102 million population now benefit from it every month, whether they are poor or well off. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has decided to cut this cycle and prevent issuing new ration cards for family members.
ثقافة النمو السكاني We have to change the culture of population growth. If you want 1, 2 or 6 children without being able to provide for them and to give them good education and more, you have to take a step back. No one who is getting married from now on will receive food ration cards. If you're getting married and yet you're waiting for the country to give you a ration card, it means you're getting married and yet you can't even spend on yourself. This is not right. This has been deep-rooted in our culture. It is only in our country that you will buy things cheaper than its real value, you get services at less cost, and when you have children, the state feeds them. We cannot afford it anymore.
Officials believe that cutting food subsidies for children would automatically reduce the country's high birth rates, a big problem for the developing nation. Though this move could anger millions who have been benefiting from ration cards for decades, experts say it's correcting what's wrong.
Poverty rates in Egypt are about 29.7%, down from 32% in 2017. That is about 32 million citizens. The ones who receive subsidized food are over 64 million. So there is a big gap between 64 million who use ration cards and 32 million who are eligible for the ration cards. The decision by the president is to reduce the gap.
According to official statistics, in 2020 the government had spent $10.5 billion on food subsidies, a big portion of the state budget's $80 billion. The new decision will save nearly half this amount, thus freeing funds for other social security programs.
There is the Dignified Life program to develop the rural villages in Egypt from the year 2020 to 2023 and will benefit 58 million people at a cost of $44 billion. This is just one example. There is also the monthly financial income scheme on the Takaful and Karama social program, which costs $1.2 billion and benefits about 3.27 million families. That's about 14 million Egyptians.
The process to only allow ration cards to those who really need it begins in 2022. It is part of a comprehensive restructuring of the social safety net at the North African country to help eradicate poverty and improve living conditions for the low-income earners. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, Nigeria's public debt load has become a big talking point in the country as it approaches the $100 billion mark. With debt service taking up well over 60% of available revenues, many fear that the country's debt load may become unsustainable. But the federal government, in its defense, says that the debt is necessary to build the public infrastructure the country desperately needs. Here's CGTN's Deji Bademosi with that report.
Nigeria plans to spend close to $42 billion next year. But what's got people talking is the budget deficit, which is slightly more than a quarter of the entire budget. At about $15.2 billion, the budget deficit is 3.39% of the country's GDP. And to make up for the deficit, the government will have to borrow to fund the budget.
There's no way you can worship money and talk about policy and talk. People are dying. So they have to borrow money to invest. And then the thing was that we needed an expansionary policy, because we went into stagflation. So at the time, the inflation was rising as well as unemployment and output collapsing. This is a different type of recession. So they had to fight it out by pouring money on it and then raising revenue for the household and all kinds of statutory forbearance on the banks and bringing down interest rate. All those measures kicked us out of recession within one quarter. So it's a very necessary thing to do.
As at September this year, Nigeria's total debt stood at approximately $93 billion, with additional borrowings expected to fund the 2022 budget. The figure will surely go up.
What is more worrying is that if you look at the analysis, we're borrowing to curb to spend on recurrent expenditure, and that for me is not a good thing. Today, we have excess of 90% debt to revenue ratio, and that is also very worrying. So yes, our debt position is indeed very worrying.
The government says Nigeria's debt challenge is actually a revenue one. While the country's debt to GDP ratio is currently at 35.7%, its debt service to revenue ratio is 70%. It's a clear evidence that the government will need to drive up revenues substantially for the country's debt to be sustainable.
We all have to work, not just federal government, but state governments, to increase our revenue. to enhance our debt service obligations. And we also have to make sure that when we're choosing the projects, we're choosing carefully the ones that will enhance business environment so that more revenue yields comes into the treasuries of the country.
Nigeria's infrastructure needs are enormous, and with the help of borrowings, the country is gradually addressing its infrastructure gap. With the help of funding from China, for instance, the country is modernizing its railways, building roads, new aviation terminals, and many others. But many are still worried over the ballooning debt profile of the country. DG Badimosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, the military takeover in Sudan has been met with mass demonstrations amid a groundswell of support for a civilian-led government. On the 21st of November, the country's deposed Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok, signed a deal to rejoin the government after weeks under house arrest. He says his mission is to prevent the country from further bloodshed, but calls for a purely civilian-led government without the military still persist. Our correspondent, Naba Mohideen, reports from Khartoum.
Been a rocky and violent few months for Sudan, as the country grapples with uncertain leadership. A military coup in October was met with widespread protests, calling for a return to civilian rule. Scores of people have been killed in clashes in the last 2 months alone. But the reinstatement of the country's civilian Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has brought fresh hopes of reform. But the deal he struck with leaders of the military coup has been met with resistance.
We've experienced this partnership before. We were betrayed, and there's no assurances that prevent us from another betrayal. Unless we've got eyes inside the cabinet's closed doors, we'll keep protesting.
Leader of the military coup, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, insists he is committed to the new government partnership.
The deal signed with the Prime Minister last November is the only safe exit and the only roadmap to complete the transition. There is no way to go back from what has been done.
The new year should see preparations for fresh elections in 2023. Some analysts believe the reality of the situation in Sudan means elections may not happen.
We may see signs of elections, and the constitution will rule the transitional period, but holding elections needs big preparations that won't be achieved in 1 year.
The situation is volatile in Sudan's capital. Government structures still need to be formed, including Legislative Council and Elections Commission. Observers say the beginning of the new year will determine the future of this new partnership and the transition. Naba Mohideen, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
Let's turn over to Senegal. The country has unveiled the first new rail line to be built since it gained independence from France. The regional express links the industrial city of Diamniadio to the capital of Dakar.
The new $1.3 billion commuter railway looks to ease traffic heading to and in Senegal's capital, Dakar. Currently, the regional express service connects Dakar to the industrial city of Diamniadio.
Today, here in Diamniadio, the emerging Senegal has taken a new step in its upward trajectory. Our march towards our emergence continues because tomorrow, the regional express will arrive at Blaise Diagne Airport, and then step by step, we will go to Thiès, to Mbour, and even further.
The railway is part of President Macky Sall's Senegal Emergent Plan, which looks to speed up the country's development.
All Dakar residents are victims of traffic jams. You lose a lot of time, you lose energy, sometimes you lose markets, you lose even in the operation of the public and private sector. It is a huge difficulty, and without the railway, you cannot go far.
The railway is expected to carry around 115,000 passengers daily. The 45-minute ride from Diamniadio will cost $3 US. Astatal, CGTN.
It's about 18:30 GMT. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. The rapid spread of the Omicron variant of COVID is threatening New Year Eve plans in the US. And China confirms its space station was forced to take evasive action to avoid a collision with satellites launched by SpaceX.
Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
No war, no one again he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
The Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's run through some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. Starting in Sudan, dozens of miners are dead, 8 others are missing after a rudimentary gold mine collapsed in the country. The disaster happened in the town of Nuhud. It's about 500 kilometers west of Khartoum, the country's capital. Artisanal gold mining is often a very dangerous profession in Sudan because of weak infrastructure mostly. An official at the company said that 4 miners were killed at the same mine in January. In East Africa, police in Uganda are holding close to 30 people in connection with a new rebel group operating in 2 districts in the central part of the country. Police claim that this group is known as the Uganda Coalition Forces of Change, and they claim it's responsible for the recent killings of 7 police officers in the last 4 months. International partners are calling for dialogue in order to end differences between Somalia's 2 leaders, the president and the prime minister, in order to head off yet another political crisis. A rift between President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo and his prime minister, Mohamed Hussein Roble, on Monday is already threatening long-delayed parliamentary elections within the country. And finally, research by South African scientists suggests that the Omicron variant of COVID could displace the Delta variant of coronavirus. That's because this new infection with this new variant of Omicron apparently seems to boost immunity to the older one. Now, the study only covered a small group of people. It's not yet been peer-reviewed, but it did find that people who are infected with Omicron, particularly those who had been vaccinated, developed enhanced immunity to the Delta variant of COVID. That's a run through your headlines. Now, a surge in new COVID cases has caused airlines to cancel over 1,000 flights in the United States alone on Monday. That was the fourth consecutive day of flight cancellations that left thousands of travelers stranded. The 7-day moving average of new COVID cases in the U.S. stood at over 206,000 on the 26th of December. Officials are now warning people to scale down or cancel their travel plans for New Year's Eve. It is Tian Xiao now reports.
It's the Christmas surprise no one wanted or expected. Tens of thousands of passengers have been stranded at airports across the United States and abroad after hundreds of flights were cancelled in recent days amid an uptick during the holiday weekend.
One of my best friends is stuck in Mexico right now, and her family just tested positive, and they got kicked out of their hotel room, and it's just a whole disaster.
At Los Angeles International Airport alone, nearly 120 flights were cancelled, disrupting travel plans for as many as 200,000 passengers. According to a flight tracking website, FlightAware.com, more than 1,200 flights in the U.S. and some 6,000 globally have been cancelled.
I actually came here for my dad's funeral. I'll go ahead and share that. And we feel like he's been watching over us the whole time. So we feel really blessed, and we feel like this plane's going to take off, and he's up there helping us out.
While some cancellations were due to bad weather, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, others were largely due to staffing shortages, as many airline workers called in sick following a number of coronavirus outbreaks.
The sheer volume of cases that we're seeing now, yesterday we had 214,000 cases. Even with a diminution in severity, we still could have a surge on hospitals, particularly among the unvaccinated, which they were really worried about.
Officials are urging people to scale down or cancel their New Year's Eve plans at a time when airlines are struggling to meet travel demands with healthy staff. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
Onto a story with an out-of-this-world dimension now. On Tuesday, China's Foreign Affairs Ministry confirmed that its space station was forced to take evasive action twice in order to avoid collision with satellites which are part of the SpaceX-owned Starlink program. These are the comments from the ministry spokesperson, Zhao Lijian.
It is the cause of the entire human race to peacefully explore and utilize the outer space. China has always been peacefully exploring the outer space under the principle of seeking benefit for all human beings. The U.S. should respect the international outer space mechanism based on the international law and immediately take measures to prevent such incidents from happening again. We urge the U.S. to act responsibly to safeguard the life and safety of astronauts in orbit.
The Moon and Mars.
Now, the Starlink satellites apparently had two close encounters with the Chinese space station, one on the 1st of July, the other on the 21st of October. That's according to documents submitted by Chinese authorities earlier this month to the United Nations Space Agency. SpaceX has deployed nearly 1,900 satellites to serve its Starlink broadband network, and more launches are planned. On Monday, China unveiled two shortened negative lists for foreign investment. The new list takes effect on Saturday, January the 1st, and it sees the number of items that are effectively off limits for foreign capital reduced to 31 from 33. In pilot free trade zones, the number has been cut down to 27 from 30. Now, the list has also scrapped restrictions on foreign investors' shareholdings in passenger car makers. It also essentially allows them to have more than two automaking joint ventures at the same time. Now, the global economy continued to get hammered by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021. We just reported, of course, on the travel restrictions that we're seeing all over the place. Energy shortages and supply chain disruptions actually did get worse in some markets. In China, the country's foreign trade levels do continue to grow. CGTN's Gao Ang has the data and the trends for the year.
In November, I covered the 4th China International Import Expo, one of the world's largest trade events here at the National Exhibition and Convention Center behind me. Nearly 3,000 companies from over 100 countries and regions took part. $70 billion worth of tentative deals were agreed. But it's just one indication of China's booming foreign trade.
Chinese exports surged by a third.
The numbers are very strong.
Chinese exports are doing very well.
And the trade balance between U.S. and China.
The domestic slowdown that.
How resilient can those trade numbers be going forward?
China's total imports and exports grew to over $5 trillion for the first 11 months this year, up 22% year on year. For comparison, that's about Japan's total GDP in 2020. Experts say that COVID has driven up China's exports of medical devices and household appliances for the past 2 years.
But this year's trade composition changed quite a bit because of the excessive monetary expansion in most of the Western economy. Their housing market received a big boost. We have seen the export surge in the decoration materials, equipment, tools, protection gears for labor.
ASEAN is now China's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade up by 38% year on year in the first half of 2021. And the world's largest free trade deal, RCEP, will take effect next year.
So we are very excited that China and ASEAN, and in this case Malaysia, that we have now reached another level of cooperation with China.
And surprisingly, China-US tensions haven't affected trade that much. China's trade surplus with the U.S. rose to 2.3 trillion yuan, or $360 billion for the first 11 months, and demand for both consumer and industrial goods increased.
The only uncertainty now is whether the U.S. will eliminate the tariffs imposed for China's imports, which I think is highly likely.
This year marked the 20th anniversary of China's accession to the WTO. According to data from the UN, China's share of global trade increased to nearly 15% in 2020.
If we look at the fundamentals in China's economy, eventually it has to shift back to consumption as its main economic driver rather than export.
And while shipping cost still remains a big challenge among many uncertainties, analysts are still optimistic about China's foreign trade in the year to come. Gang, CGTN, Shanghai.
Now, the U.S. retail giant Walmart has removed Xinjiang-produced commodities from its high-end membership store, Sam's Club. This comes after the U.S. President Joe Biden signed a bill banning goods from China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. CGTN's Su Zhu has that story.
Many angry Chinese customers have suspended their Sam's Club membership cards after Walmart removed Xinjiang products from the store. The move also triggered backlash from many Chinese netizens. Hashtag Sam's Club Xinjiang on China's social media platform Weibo has been one of the most searched terms, with the number of searches hitting nearly 10 million till now. Sam's Club did not respond to queries from CGTN. Legal experts are of the view that the U.S. accusations about Xinjiang goods are baseless.
The law creates a rebuttal presumption that all goods partially or wholly produced in Xinjiang are taken by forced labor, unless companies present with clear and convincing evidence. In fact, it's impossible to provide clear and convincing evidence because the U.S. government won't recognize the evidence not certified by third party.
Zhang Yixuan says that the U.S. legislation violates the principle of international law and the free trade principles of the World Trade Organization.
Meanwhile, it's unconstitutional in the U.S. as well. The Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution provides the presumption of innocence. The law, however, assumes products from Xinjiang are made with forced labor, which is a presumption of guilty in the first place. Therefore, it contradicts the Constitution and have no chance to survive a challenge in the federal court.
Xinjiang is a major fruit supplier in China and a global cotton provider. Official data shows the region has the highest per capita fruit production in China. It also supplies around 20% of the world's cotton and more than 40% of the world's solar-grade polysilicon. Experts say banning goods from Xinjiang will harm the market not only in China but also in the U.S.
The enforcement means the U.S. is actually attempting to remove Xinjiang from global industrial supply chain. Cotton, tomato, polysilicon are on the high priority sectors of the list. That is to say, the industry has to find alternative supplies and the price will rise up. This will cause huge costs for American companies.
Data from the General Administration of Customs shows that Xinjiang's exports to the U.S. doubled to $64 million on a yearly basis during the first quarter of the year. Zhu, CGTN, Beijing.
Turkey's lira has become the world's most volatile currency. Industries dependent on imports have been deeply affected by this currency crisis. Some, in fact, have had to take action to protect themselves from going bankrupt. But this decision is also impacting local citizens too. CGTN's Michal Bar-David reports from Istanbul.
Turkey has been facing a currency crisis which saw the lira tumble to record lows before recovering some of those losses after the government announced new measures to protect citizens' savings on December 20th. Inflation stands at around 21%, and many industries have been affected by the volatility in the Turkish currency, especially those relying on imports such as gas.
Thousands in Istanbul cross the Bosphorus Strait between Asia and Europe daily with motorboats and ferries. One of the most popular maritime transportation companies, Turyol, has announced it has halted some of its services due to the current conditions of the Turkish economy.
The factor that impacted us the most is the high cost of fuel. There has been a 260% increase between the fuel we bought at the beginning of the year and the fuel we bought today.
Turyol chair John explains that several vessels have been docked and the company is considering laying off employees.
Another issue is that the technical equipment necessary for the safety of our vessels is indexed to foreign currency. This equipment is sold in a foreign currency and we have to pay for them in liras for whatever the exchange rate is on the current day.
John stresses that access to safe and affordable public transportation is a basic right.
It is not possible to do this job without a government incentive. This is as important as education, national defense, health, etc. The state has to provide public transportation.
Many locals say they've been affected by Turyol's decision to halt some services.
The route I used to take very often has been cancelled, which requires me to walk further. This now means I'm in a rush whenever I do travel. These cancellations have affected me in many ways. If it continues, we will have great difficulty in terms of transportation. We are worried about the days to come.
Turyol has applied to local and central authorities for financial and gas support. However, requests have so far been denied. If the volatility in the Turkish currency continues, more industries will likely be affected in the year to come. Michal Bar-David, CGTN, Istanbul.
Frictions do continue between Western European countries and Russia over gas supplies. Western Europe is experiencing a winter of pretty high, record in fact in some cases, gas prices. And authorities over there are accusing Moscow of curbing gas supplies for political reasons, therefore driving prices even higher. Russia, however, denies those accusations.
The Arctic cold has come early this winter to the streets of Moscow. But apartments here are unaffected by the frigid temperatures.
It is minus 21 outside, but we had to switch off the radiator, and sometimes we need to open the window as it's very, very hot.
Russia doesn't have energy supply issues, as it's one of the world's largest producers and exporters of natural gas. In the face of a colder winter than normal, Western Europe is accusing Russia of using its gas exports for political gains. Russian observers dismiss the claim and say that Gazprom, one of Russia's largest producers and exporters of natural gas, is just doing business and trying to reach long-term contracts with European buyers.
Selling gas to the European market without those contracts is just not interesting for Gazprom, and that's the essence of the conflict between the Russian and European side.
Observers say Europe has not built up a sufficient supply of gas to guarantee there will be enough fuel to heat homes and businesses this winter. If an agreement isn't reached, Europe would have to start purchasing Russian gas on the open market, paying astronomical fees. Gas prices soared earlier this month after German officials said the completed Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia to Germany could not be certified. It is unlikely it will be open anytime soon, and that is contributing to market instability.
Natural gas is a transitional fuel to counter climate change and dirty coal-generated energy. Opposing projects like Nord Stream 2 pipeline is nonsense.
As temperatures go down across Europe, it seems that politics is at the core of whether European apartments will be warm this winter.
80% of all Russian energy exports are destined for the West. And regardless of the West's rapid turn to clean energy, such alternatives still cannot fully replace Russian fuel. The only solution for both sides out of this crisis is negotiation. But that seems to be increasingly unlikely recently. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, Moscow.
All right, then, still on that energy tangent, if your one indicator for what normal looks like is essentially the price chart for oil, you'd be forgiven for thinking that traders don't think there's a pandemic in progress, or at least, at the very least, that the Omicron variant isn't going to really crush energy demand. So take a look at what Brent futures have been doing today. They've come within 16 US cents of the $80 a barrel level. Spot platinum prices, of course, are around 1.1% higher today, over $985 an ounce, but it's still a far cry from the year's peak of $13.05. Spot platinum prices, in fact, are down 8% so far in the year, but the platinum majors in South Africa, they're having a pretty decent year. Amplats, that's Anglo American Platinum and Impala Platinum, their shares are up nearly 25% and over 8% higher, respectively. Here's what's coming up next. We'll introduce you to a Kenyan startup that's weaning households off charcoal, one household at a time.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to the program. Now, for many households right across sub-Saharan Africa, biomass fuels like charcoal and firewood, they still tend to be the primary energy source. However, charcoal and firewood, they're both not just major air polluters, but they're also key drivers of deforestation. And they're creating demand effectively for affordable alternatives. One firm, MGAS, is focusing on the low-income market for low-emission cooking fuel. So it's deploying gas tanks with smart valves that allow customers to pay for the LPG they want to use in small increments.
When dusk blankets Nairobi and most of rural Kenya, many dinners simmer over charcoal fires. Charcoal is a major polluter and driver of deforestation, but M-gas may have a solution. Customers say the gas is cleaner, cheaper and more convenient than traditional fuels like wood or kerosene.
I feel M-gas serves me better as there is no smoke. Cooks my tea faster than when I used to cook using the stove and kerosene. It would take a really long time. Now, I only pay whatever amount that is available to me for the gas.
It doesn't cost me as much as when I used kerosene or charcoal. Mostly I used the stove and I spent about $1 daily. And even if I bought 5 liters of kerosene, it would only last me for 1 week and it would cost me about $6.
Only 1 week.
This month, M-gas received $25 million from UK-based Circle Gas, whose investors include regional telecoms giant Safaricom. The firm says the potential market is huge, citing that around 3 billion people globally use dirty fuel for cooking. This contributes to air pollution that causes an estimated 4 million premature deaths each year, according to the World Health Organization.
The market is massive, so we really want to grow this at scale. We are only here because we want to have a huge impact at scale. So let's see how we go, but if I were a dreamer, and I'm a bit of a dreamer, in a couple of years, some million households in Kenya, some million households in Tanzania, and let's see from where we go from there.
Using charcoal or wood also drives severe deforestation. According to the World Bank, dirty cooking fuels generate about as much greenhouse gases as the aviation industry, about 2% of the global total. For many years, there was little alternative. But the recent explosion of mobile money, more affordable technology to build smart meters, and urbanization have combined to make pay-as-you-go gas competitive. M-gas installs the stove, 13-kilogram gas cylinder and meters collectively worth around $80 in customers' homes for free. Buying the same size tanks outright costs around $22, too expensive for many families. The smart meters on the M-gas tanks mean customers can make small payments, even meal by meal, on their mobile phones. It also alerts the company when the gas is about to run out and a new tank is delivered free of charge. The cost of the stove, meters and delivery is paid through a small premium on the overall price of the gas, so there's no upfront cost and it takes around 2 years for the cost of the equipment to be paid off. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
All right, then let's wrap up the program with a run through the currencies. We're going to focus on Nigeria. For most of this pandemic, really, the Naira has been in a series of very gradual devaluations. So if you go all the way back to March 2020 to date, the currency is down around 14% against American dollar. On the debt side, the country offered a 600-odd million sukuk bond, and that offer closed on the 23rd of December. According to the debt management office over there, it got over $2 billion in bid. So you're looking at a subscription rate of over 340%. Proceeds from that issuance will go into a range of road projects within Nigeria. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. Many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C. Happy holidays.